in the last 2 decades,
Yeah.
because it's interesting to me how advocacy becomes a thing, because there have been people on the show that are big advocates. They're also scientists, but it's a really unusual thing. Now, people like Einstein, were big advocates, say against nuclear war or things like that, and about understanding the nature of our universe so we understand our place in it and this kind of humanity that met the science. And I think in advocacy, where we've let down the public, is that we put our smartest people back in the lab. We don't let them use language that triggers emotions, because we're not trained to do that as scientists. And then we wonder why celebrities and other people run with this stuff.
Well, what happened was that the way this got started was a very interesting way. I moved from Yale to George Washington University in 2000 to chair the microbiology department. I was a young department chair, 40 years old. And so here I was in the microbiology department a few blocks from the White House, and then anthrax hit. There were the anthrax attacks.
Oh, and that's 2001.
In Washington, New York. And what happened was the Centers for Disease Control had sort of gone into shutdown mode. They weren't really talking to journalists, and this was not far after 9/11, right? And so the major news outlets were going crazy, wanting to talk to experts. So who do you talk to? The guy who had the microbiology department next to the White House, and so the phone was ringing off the hook. Now, what did I know about anthrax, right? I mean, I knew as much about, I've never had seen a case of anthrax. I knew as much about anthrax as anybody who had infectious disease training, had to study it for a board exam or something like that. I literally had Mandel's infectious disease book open to the anthrax chapter, and Stan Plotkin's vaccine book open to the anthrax chapter. And I was getting calls from Donald McNeil, the New York Times, and Steve Sternberg, who's USA Today, and Maggie Fox at Reuters. And, I was practically reading from the chapter, pretending like I wasn't reading. And they all thought I was the smartest thing that ever lived, and wound up cultivating a whole group of journalists, and found that I enjoyed it. I liked the intellectual interaction with, especially science journalists. They're really smart people. Yeah. And they ask questions that I never would have asked myself, and they forced you to look up things. And I actually I found it a great learning experience, so it was something I really enjoyed. And then what happened was, at that time, the Millennium Development Goals had been launched by the United Nations, and I was...
What are those?
Those are the set of shared goals for global poverty reduction. At that time, how to address the plight of people who live in extreme poverty, what were then called the bottom billion, 1 billion people in the world that live below the World Bank poverty figure of what was then $1 a day, and how to lift those people out of poverty. And there was a goal for infectious diseases called to combat AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. And then I realized, everything I had done, studying parasitic diseases and tropical diseases, was now called other diseases. So you saw all of the excitement of Bono, getting up there talking about HIV/AIDS, and you had Angelina Jolie, and then at that time you got Angelina, you got Brad as well. So this was creating all this buzz. And
I miss Brangelina. I really do.
Yeah, me too. And here I was stuck, working on something called other disease. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Also ran?
Fuck, that's amazing. I'm not doing other diseases. So we teamed up with two colleagues, David Molyneux at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and Alan Fennick at Imperial College London. And we went about doing a branding exercise, just calling it Neglected Tropical Diseases. And